For today's video, we're going to talk about how to multiply numbers using the distributive property. So our learning target today is I can use the distributive property to multiply numbers. Please write down the date you're watching this, write down what you already know, and you might not already know anything about the distributive property, but you definitely know about multiplying numbers. So you could write about that. And we have one vocab word today, which is distribute, which means to give out shares or to deal or pass out. Please pause the video at this point, write all that down, and restart when you're ready. So the distributive property is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to start by showing you an example of what it is and how it works, and then I'm going to give you the rule. So let's say I had a rectangle. And this rectangle, I told you, was 4 units tall and 3 units wide. If I wanted you to find the area, you would do 4 times 3, and we would get an area of 12. Now let's say I had a second rectangle, and this rectangle also has a height of 4, but this one has a width of 6. If I wanted you to find the area, you would do 4 times 6, which is 24. You would add that to. If I then wanted you to add those areas, we have an area of 12, we have an area of 24. You do 12 plus 24 and get an area of 36. Now, there's a second way I could solve this problem. And let's say that I push those two rectangles together. So because these both had a height of 4, they would turn into one long rectangle. This one had a width of 3, this one had a width of 6. So all together, the whole thing has a width of 9. If I wanted to find the area, I would do 4 times 9, and that still gives me 36. So I got 36 whether I found the area of each rectangle separately and added them, or I got that if I pushed them together, added the side lengths, and multiplied. I can do the same thing without area. So a second example of what is happening in this would be, let's say I did 2 times 5 and 2 times 10. Well, 2 times 5 is 5. 2 times 10, or 2 times 5 is 10, and 2 times 10 is 20. And if I asked you to add those together, ten plus 20 is 30. Now, because the number 2 is what I multiplied each of these by, just like in our example before, I could start by adding my 5. And then multiplying by that 2. 5 plus 10 is 15, and 2 times 15 is 30. In both cases, I got the number 30. Both of these things that I just showed you are examples of the distributive property. So I'm going to tell you what the rule is for the distributive property. The rule is that for all numbers A, B, and C, and A, B, and C, these represent variables. Basically, it means that this works for any number. So we're using variables, we're using letters to stand in for our numbers just to show that this would work for any numbers. And so for any numbers, if I have A times, remember, times can also turn invisible next to a parenthesis, B plus C in parentheses. That would be the same if I took the A times the B and the A times the C and then added them together. This also works if what's inside the parentheses is subtraction. So if I took my A and I multiplied it by a subtraction that's in B minus C that's in the parentheses, I can still do the same thing. I could multiply the A times the B, I could multiply the A times the C, and then subtract. If you're looking at this and going, wow, that's really complicated and I'm not sure what it means, I'm going to show you. But while we're doing these problems, one thing that's really important is that our directions here say rewrite using the distributive property. You'll notice what they don't say is they don't say solve the problem. They say rewrite. And I'm going to show you why that matters. So let's say you had a problem that said rewrite using the distributive property. And the problem was 8, and then in parentheses 10 plus 4. Now, if we were just going to solve this using PEMDAS, using order of operations, we would do 10 plus 4 is 14. And then we would do 14 times 8, which is 112. However, the directions did not say to do that. The directions told us to rewrite using the distributive property. So here's what it wants us to do. Rewriting my problem over here. If I want to use the distributive property, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 8 and I'm going to distribute the 8 to the 10 and multiply that. And then I'm going to distribute the 8 to the 4 and multiply that. So I will do 8 times 10, and I will do 8 times 4. And then this plus sign just goes in the middle. 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 4 is 32. 80 plus 32 is 112. Now what you see here is I got the same answer with 112 in both of those spots. So you may be going, wow, the second method was a lot more work. Why would we ever do that? Well, the answer to that is what I really care about in this step is this part right here, where you rewrote the problem using the distributive property. Because that was what we were told to do in the directions. So you still may be wondering, but why? Why do we care? Why do we want to solve this problem using this harder, more complicated method? And the answer is very simple, that the distributive property is really important in algebra. And so we're going to start using it with numbers today, where we can check the answer like we did here, where we said, okay, we got the same answer here and here. So that means we solved the problem correctly. When we get to algebra, it's not as easy to check our work. So we're going to learn the distributive property with this practice using numbers, and then we can apply the distributive property next to algebra. The distributive property is one of the most powerful tools in algebra, and it's really important that we understand it. So this also works for subtraction. So let's say I had 3 outside the parentheses, and then that's being multiplied by 4 minus 2 inside parentheses. If I have the same directions of rewrite using the distributive property, just like before, I would take the 3 times the 4, and I'll take the 3 times the 2. So I'll have 3 times 4 and 3 times 2 after I distribute the 3 to everything inside the parentheses. And then this time I just bring a subtraction down. Now I can finish and solve it. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6. 12 minus 6 is 6. Now the other thing we can do is we can actually go backwards. So let's say I asked you to rewrite using the distributive property backwards, and I gave you the problem 7 times 9 plus 7 times 5. Well, in this case, I'm trying to put it in a format. So I have a number outside the parentheses being multiplied by 2 things being added inside. I know it's addition because of that plus sign there. Well, here I see that there is a 7 attached to both of those numbers. That means that the 7 is what goes outside the parentheses. And inside there would be 9 plus 5. I can also do this with subtraction. So let's say I had 3 times 11 minus 3 times 4. In this case, same thing. I want to rewrite it, but this time as it's going to look like that with a subtraction inside the parentheses. Again, when I'm doing this, I say, okay, well, the 3 is the number that shows up in both sets. So the 3 is the number that goes outside, and inside I have 11 minus 4. Please make sure you do the practices and make sure you understand how the distributive property works with numbers before you try to move on to the distributive property with algebra section. As always, please let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.